Hello and a very warm welcome back to HuwsNursery, but we're not at HuwsNursery. Where are we?
We're by the farm in Monmouthshire.
So I hope a lot of you guys know Liz, and Liz has an absolutely fantastic channel really focusing on homesteading as well, and has such a beautiful vegetable garden. And you were saying this about the size of an allotments plot.
Yeah.
But the amount of food that you're growing is quite incredible. But they also have some poultry as well. So it's yourself and Mr. J.
Yep.
And you have poultry, so I've seen chickens, ducks, and also turkeys as well.
And we've got some guinea fowl just growing up now.
Got some guinea fowl, and you got some bees as well.
And we have bees too.
So
yes.
you've got just under an acre. There's a lot of food happening. And how many freezers have you got full of food?
We've got 4 freezers full of food. So last year I grew and foraged around £2,000 of food.
It's incredible. So is it right in saying that your food bill is actually quite minute?
It's tiny, it's absolutely tiny. So it is literally just the things that we can't grow here. And an awful lot of things that we don't have. So we don't have space for cattle or pigs or lamb, but we do quite a lot of trading. So we'll actually barter fruit and vegetables for meat that we need from elsewhere.
I think that's perfect, because a lot of the things that we've lost in this modern society is, I think too often we feel that everything has to revolve around money.
Yeah.
But when you bring in the bartering system, you suddenly break down all of those tough barriers where you don't really know how much everything costs, and you just base it a lot more off friendship and giving something that you produce in exchange for something else. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about the homesteading and the gardening community, is whether it's seeds or plants or produce, you can have a really nice sharing experience.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes it really special.
And it's actually really easy to do, even if you're just growing a small amount of food in a raised bed or even on your windowsill, because you can still swap some of it with other people for something different that they've grown.
And it doesn't even have to be food. Maybe it's a service. Maybe they're quite good at doing something DIY. So you say, "Oh, can I give you some food if you can fix my sink?" You know, really simple things like this. And I think that's where the whole idea as well of creativity, because the reason why we love growing our own food, one of the reasons, is because it's such a creative process. I love being able to choose different varieties, and I'm going to be getting some new beans from you as well. So, you know, things like that is really fun. But how did you get started?
Well, we were just looking for a new home, and in the period between choosing this lovely site and actually moving here, I became ill, and it became really obvious I wasn't going to be going back to work. So I said, well, so that I could make a contribution to the household, how about I grew some fruit and veg, and then it kind of expanded into a lot of fruit and veg, and then pretty much all of our fruit and veg, not all of it, but pretty much all of it, and then the poultry as well. And it just grew and grew.
It certainly has, and it was amazing, because I've been watching some of Liz's videos, and it's amazing to come here. I said when I first arrived, it's quite surreal to come and arrive at your film set. But, you know, tell me a bit more about your channel. You've done, it must be over 500 videos now.
Yes.
And teach all sorts of things. So if someone somehow doesn't know your channel, tell us a bit about what you can expect.
Okay, so I do an almost daily video, and sometimes it's a how-to. So recently I've done how to make apple cider vinegar, and sometimes it's just a look at a social situation. So sometimes I'll make a social comment, but mostly it's just our day-to-day life here, and the ups and downs, and I absolutely bring the camera for all the downs as well. So this week it's been all about the really high winds blowing our beans down, which are just in front of us here, which should be stood up nicely, but they're lying down on the ground. And I try and show that the whole process from sowing them to the excitement of them just starting to grow, to actually the feeling of really quite miserable disaster when they've all collapsed, which, you know, it can't all go right all the time, and I think it's quite important to be able to show how you then deal with it when something's not going quite how you want it to. So some of it's vlog, some of it's how-tos, and a little bit is just my opinion, and I've got plenty of that.
Everyone's got opinions, and I think that's a really important thing as well, and you'll be seeing this on the b-roll now, is the beans might have fallen over, but looking at it now, there's still a load of beans on there, and you must have been harvesting those for weeks anyway.
I have been, yes.
And your freezers, you've got some drawers just full of beans. Yeah. And so have you found that it's making you experiment with more ways of using the same produce? Because yes. I got quite bored with same old courgettes all the time, but then when you look at really tasty things like courgette fritters, it suddenly changes the dynamic. So
yeah, and I'm learning all the time, because so much of this food I either haven't grown before, or I have never tried before, and so it's always experimenting with new flavours and then combinations of flavours, and so, some of them work really well and other than just work. But today we've had quite a nice meal today.
Well, I was blessed. I arrived, and what was served? Well, pancakes. So thank you very much for that.
It's so it was second breakfast time when Hugh arrived.
Yeah, and I think another really special thing is you have so much food, but it's only a few meters away from your house,
yeah.
And you've got that really nice close circle. And one of the things that I've noticed is you're putting in some permaculture principles and just simple, a bit of common sense,
yeah.
Looking at what resources you have in your local area. And there are two which really spring out to mind. You've got the chicken and poultry bedding,
yeah.
And you've also got wood chips.
Yeah.
So how do you use those in the garden?
So the wood chips I use as pathways in amongst all the vegetables, and also in the food forest area, and then as the wood chips have been around for a little while, they start breaking down, and once they've broken down enough, I then scoop them up and put them onto the raised beds for it to start becoming organic matter or compost in the raised beds. And then the chicken bedding and indeed the duck bedding I use as a mulch, and then I'll leave that over winter to start breaking down, and in the spring, once I've planted things, I then use it to mulch again. So it's always about keeping the weeds down, so reducing the amount of work I've got to do there, and keeping moisture in.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And what's happening is this video, if all goes well, this video is coming out exactly the same day and time as your video is coming out, when we filmed a video together for Liz's channel this morning.
Yeah.
And you can find out a bit more about things like that, including me doing some wheelbarrow loads for you,
yeah,
and stuff.
So yeah, Hugh's done loads of work for us this morning, which is thank you.
Wow. And we're going to be heading off to a farm later on, so stay tuned for a video on that. But what amazed me is just how much food you're producing on a small scale. So say if someone has a bit of land,
yeah,
what kind of advice or tips or what direction would you send someone on to get started?
I would say start small and experiment, because it's much easier to keep a smaller area under control, and then once you're confident that you can cope with that bit, then expand it. So this vegetable garden's taken 3 years. I've done it in 3 stages, just to be able to keep on top to some extent of the weeds, and also just creating the garden and understanding how it is.
Now, one thing I've noticed is I think you do quite a bit of recycling. For example, the fence and also your raised beds, and I think it's one of the best ways really to get started is to find things for low cost. So did you just happen to stumble across some things?
Okay, I actually actively looked for pallets, and we started off by just driving around, and very often people leave pallets at the front of their house because they've had something delivered, they don't know what to do with it, and a quick knock on the door and say, would you mind? We got our first probably 25 pallets that way.
Wow.
And then I found a company fairly locally who had a huge stack of pallets, which they were very happy to sell us at £1 each. and these are long pallets, so they're 8 foot long, which meant that we could then change out some of the smaller ones and start creating fencing that goes around the vegetable garden to stop the ducks and the chickens eating all of our vegetables. And then the same people asked us if we had any use of pallet collars, which are stack on top of a pallet for them to put loose items in. And I just opened them out and created our raised beds out of them. And the great thing about those is they're stackable. So as time goes on and I've created more and more organic matter, we can have deeper and deeper raised beds.
And that's something which is almost a necessity for you, because like what we have really shallow topsoil.
Yeah.
So that's where raised bed gardening really does shine, and it obviously does, because looking all around here you've got so much food. One thing that I really do like about this garden and the whole setting, it's actually quite rustic, and I really like that country feel, and it also feels very natural as well, because you're creating a food forest, and I've got some videos about food forests as well, one of the recent ones with James Prigioni, so you can find out 10 ways to transform your lawn into a food forest. But this is all to do with nature, and you raised something interesting earlier, and what's one of the main rules or lessons that you've learned from doing this?
Actually, it doesn't matter if you do it wrong, because nature will right it for you. So if you plant a bean the wrong way up, nature will find a way of sending the shoot upwards and the root down. And it's just worth keeping going with it, because nature will do most of the work for you.
No, I think that's perfect, because I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed if they come to such a productive garden. Think, where do I start? Just go for it. You're going to learn, and you're bound to have failures. Everyone has failures, and it's just part of the learning process. But I think more often than not, it's usually successes, and that just gives you, gives you something to carry on with. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope this has given you a bit more of an example or a vision of what is going on here by the farm. So stay tuned for some more videos, but before you do that, definitely check out Liz's channel to find out a whole host, or should I call it an abundance, of videos available full of really interesting things. My favourite, I think, has to be maybe the potato trial that you did recently. I love that. Things like that, they're great. So definitely check out the channel, and all the links that you could possibly want are down below in the video description. So thank you very much, Liz.
Well, thank you for visiting.
Thank you for watching as well, guys. See ya.
Bye.